But yeah, first things first, we are so happy that you're here. My name is Erin Drain, and I'm with Olé Obrigado, and we are proud to represent the wines of Luis Seabra in the United States. We're the importer. And what we're going to do is ask Luis to just introduce himself, give us a little history on his background and his winemaking background, and then we're going to hand it over to Aldo and Yannick to take us through some questions that we have about what's going on in the Douro right now. So without any further ado, Luis, if you would tell us about yourself, we thank you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. We already have 69. It's a very nice number. We keep on growing. Well, actually, whenever people ask me to talk about all my background, it's very simple. Wine, 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 wine. So I started working at investigation. Actually, I started studying viticulture. I always liked wines, so I started drinking wines at a very young age, at the age of 14. And I went to viticulture just to run away of any closed office. Unfortunately, now I spend too many hours in an office in front of a computer. But I just wanted to have free space and be with the nature and not closed somewhere. And that was the first reason I chose to study viticulture. And then already working, I've done a master in winemaking. But somehow viticulture and the wines always called my attention. And that seems to be my passion from a very young age. From the times when even my father, I'm coming from a big family, would be doing a very, I would say a very big mise-en-scène about opening a bottle of wine, choose the best bottle of wine for a Sunday meal, and my mother always cooked very well. So at the beginning I didn't understand, I was just starving, I wanted to eat immediately everything, and then suddenly I understand that it's something else about the bottle of wine that is not the simple liquid that is there. And that drove me until today, and maybe I'm still looking today for the secret behind the bottle of wine. There are so many that we cannot find them all, but there are a few that we can search for it. So I've started, I've studied viticulture. I've worked in investigation for the agriculture ministry here in Portugal. I've done consulting. I've worked for a cooperative doing very, very bad wines. I've done a little bit or everything around the wine world. Working also for Newport before I left and start my own project. So I've seen a little bit of everything of the wine world, but nothing like you doing your own thing. And I think that drove me to get to the point that you need to do your own wines, you need to control your own things from A to Z. And that's the effort that still keep on going. So I still need to do a big effort.
Thank you. Aldo and Yannick, would you please introduce yourselves?
I'll let Yannick start.
All right. Hello, everyone. Yannick Benjamin. Currently work as the sommelier at the University Club in Midtown Manhattan. And I also have my own nonprofit called Wheeling Forward. And, I met Luis for the first time. Of course, I knew plenty about him. We had this really great fundraiser last year called Alvarino. The spectrum across all the wines were fantastic, but his wines really stuck out. They were pretty fabulous, and you're really a great personality. So it's great to be on this call with you. And I want to thank Patrick for introducing me to this wonderful world of Portuguese and Spanish wine. So great job, Olé Obrigado.
Thank you, Yannick.
Thank you, Yannick.
Thank you, Yannick.
Well, I'm Aldo Sohm. Currently unshaved. This is my Corona beard that you like. Casual clothes because no one knows me in casual clothes aside in a tuxedo and a Tastevan. I work at Le Bernardin. and Aldo Sohm Wine Bar, obviously, which take my namesake. Well, Rui and we go back way, I think before the company started, and yeah, with Patrick constantly in touch. And yeah, now my team makes fun of me for pushing so much Spanish and Portuguese wine, especially in a French restaurant. But we're doing super well. I think it's very important to have an open mind and keep exploring. And obviously the wines, we can't get enough anymore. That's thanks to the great work you're doing. But regardless, anytime we pull a cork, it puts a smile in our face.
Thank you. So for those of you who might have just hopped on, we are just getting through some introductions of our guests on this call today, Luis Seabra with Yannick Benjamin and with Aldo Sohm. And I think we've got a fairly open format, very conversational, but I think certainly all of us are curious, Luis and Aldo, I know you've spent a lot of time with winemakers about how you do your work, how you make your decisions. And like I said, Aldo and Yannick, the ball is in your court to pepper the questions to Luis's way. Don't let him sneak out with any softballs, and yeah, we can take it from there.
Luis, can you describe us the Douro Valley a little bit, the subzones, and how you make decisions about which vineyards to source?
Well, Aldo, the first thing, you cannot describe Douro Valley. If you've never been there, it's impossible to describe. You have to be there and spend a few days and understand that Douro valleys are many different regions of the Douro. There are many different terroirs of the Douro, and that's the most incredible thing. We're talking about 45,000 hectares of vineyards and a total area of 200,000 hectares. And you have vineyards that go in between 80 to 800 meters altitude. So you can have a little bit of everything. Of course, the Douro Valley, it's known for the schist soils and is mainly schist. Fortunately, there's a big gap in between the viticulture that is done and the final wine that is produced, because the region was built by the port houses. And the port houses always had the interest on, they start to be a negociant to arrive in the Douro, buy the wines, and then take the wines already made to Gaia, where they will be aging. And that gave a big gap in between the person that would taking care of the viticulture, you would produce really not interesting wines, and never saw the result of a good winemaking in these wines in the Doro Valley, produced in the Doro Valley, but aged in Gaia as a port wine. So today, even today, not all of the producers, most of the producers, they describe the soil as schist, only schist. But gladly, Douro have different kind of slate soils that actually it's mostly slate, and also some of the granite soils that are on the outskirts of the Douro Valley. So all the outskirts are normally, the soils are normally granite. So the constitution of this soil is very interesting because there's several maps that indicate a little bit how the different constitution of the soils you have. We can, unfortunately, the Douro Valley, being the oldest market region as we know today, the rules we know today, more than 250 years old, doesn't have a soil chart of the Douro Valley, and that tells everything about the viticulture. So there's no true soil chart of the Douro Valley region in terms of agriculture knowledge of the soil. So there's only a few soil charts done by the militaries that don't include all the Douro. So that means that the knowledge about the Douro, it's still to be done. So although it's the oldest market region, there's a lot to know about the Douro Valley. Aldo, I think you also asked me about the decisions to make the wines.
Yeah.
Taste. That's very simple.
Yeah, but that's in theory always simpler than it in reality is.
Well, first you have to think that
I've seen the pain on winemakers when they start making decisions which parcel to harvest first. And especially in a diverse climate you described as much, life is not that simple.
No, life is very complicated, but I think what the starting point is, you have to consider a vineyard as your unit. So don't forget the varieties, because normally I'm working with the field blends. So your vineyard is your variety. So you're not harvesting Touriga Nacional or Touriga Franca. You harvest that specific vineyard. And eventually, along the time, you make more mistakes, but you learn each year. You learn more and more. I have an example: the wine Monossi. So it's 100% Castelão, a variety very known in the south of Portugal that is clearly not very common in the Douro Valley, although you can find in the old vines. I started 2016 making this wine, and it's incredible. I think 17 arrived now to States, and 18 I'm just bottling now. And it's incredible to see the evolution on wine. And not only because of the years, because 17 was a warmer year, and you can see that the wine is much more focused than the 16. Once you start learning about the vineyard and the place, you start to get, you have to interpret the vineyard. Of course, there's a lot of intuition there that you really cannot explain scientifically, because you cannot trust always the numbers, because even if you do sampling and analytic control of the ripening season, a blend in the vineyard never tell you the truth. So you really have to have your own reading of the vineyard. So that, I think that takes a little bit of time and experience, and then you adapt to that.
So what triggers the decision of harvesting when you harvest everything from the vineyard?
Well, one thing is, if acidity is dropping, harvest, don't think, period. We are in a warm region. We are on the limit of having good acidities, so do it. If not, well, everyone talking about the phenolic ripeness, that is really very difficult to describe this in the Doro Valley, in the vineyard that have more than 10 varieties. But from the moment that you easily can separate the seeds from the pulp on the grape, or you can easily see that the grapes are already releasing some color on the skins, you know that there's not an ideal point. You will never reach it, or you don't know what it is, but maybe it's the time you can harvest. So there are a few tricks, but really, and in the white wines, when you lose a little bit the green character on the grape, when you taste the grape, and then that can be the moment for you to harvest. But it's really, for me, it's really very difficult to explain.
Can you tell us a little bit, because you answered already the question, the differences between the vintages, 16, 17, 18, and 19? Well,
17, it's really the year that was a little bit all over Europe, the year that I clearly don't like. The cycle started very early. We had a very dry and hot winter, so the cycle started even before March, Feb. We had the vineyards start going, and all the cycle was really going very fast. And by the end of the ripening season, well, we didn't arrive at the end of the ripening season. By August, well, it was the first time in my life that I finished harvest 31st of August. Never before in my life in the Douro Valley. Well, I may have started in the end of August, but never finished the harvest 31st of August. So, although the wines, you know, we can enjoy the wines, most of the 17s are already out. Schist Cru Red is just getting out now, and the wine, it's really good, but knowing how was the year, it's difficult to understand how those wines are going to age. So what's the difference of harvesting in August or in September, well, almost 1 month later, and see how we feel this in 10 years in the bottle of wine? That's very interesting. On the other hand, 18 is a perfect year. for me at least, full of humidity, plenty of rain. Not a year that normally the local producers would not like because of that, but I love it because we can have, you know, all the 18 whites are just getting out there in States. They are all, you know, around 12% pH of 3, everything natural, and it's perfect year. I will bet on that year to age. We are just bottling now Xisto Ilimitado Red 18, and I tell you, this you can drink a bottle like a glass of water. It's really the kind of the year that I really like. 16, you have, although it was a colder year because you're coming from 15, it was a more hot year. And 16, although in some reds the acidity was not perfectly balanced, I find it much more interesting than 15. So you have some very interesting red 16s, and even the whites 16. One of the best Xisto Cru is 16 and is aging marvelously. I really like it. And then 19 was again a colder year for the Douro Valley, and so this last vintage was clearly not the normal thing we have in the Doro Valley, because normally we have a very warm, very hot vintages, and the last ones, well, not counting 17, they've been really very generous in terms of humidity, so slow maturation. That for me it's the most important thing, the vineyards to have time to mature and not to be running against the time.
It's a phenomenon what we see also right now, and I'm going to ask you to walk us a little bit through your lineup of the wines. Is for us sommeliers, it's often a little difficult. Well, not difficult is maybe not the right word, but a challenge. How to sell through all these wines, because often, you know, keep in mind, Portuguese is not necessarily a language which comes easily to pronounce the words in the right way. Secondly, they're very long and they're very complicated. And where do this style fits, and how will you compare it to often? You know, I noticed one thing, it was often easier when we give references like benchmarks.
Well, I think there's a common thing in between Portuguese and Spanish wines. Several times, well, I have many friends, and we get together often to blind tasting, and it's very interesting to taste with Portuguese, and you can be in the table, an international table with a few Portuguese, and I serve an old Portuguese wines, and all the Portuguese would say, "Wow, this is amazing wine," and probably for many of the foreigners they will not understand. Portugal have a bit of everything. You have normally a good tannic structure. The tannins are always present. Most of the times you have high acidity, but you can also have some warm flavors, some warmness, some balsamic notes. And this is common, for instance, with the old Riojas. So in many cases, we tasting blind and say, oh, this could be Portugal, this could be Barrada, but at the same time, this could be Rioja. So there's a Mediterranean character on the wines, and then that's a very high acidity. I think you can feel the difference if you taste old Portuguese from the 60s. The viticulture was completely different what it is now. There were a lot of the vase pruning, so the vineyards were much less efficient, and you easily have low alcohol wines with very high acidity, still showing a warm climate, but with balance. And today the wines are eventually much more perfect, but they lack this grip of the old Portuguese wines, of what we call today the bad viticulture. So I would say characteristically in general, Portuguese wines in general, a lot of balsamic notes, a lot of acidity, and a very good tannic structure. I think it's common to all the wines. But then if you go deep in it, each one have his own detail and have his own difference. And I think that will take a lot of time, maybe decades for people to understand. I think Portugal is right now in a very good moment in terms of wines. Well, now after it happens and we're all talking on Zoom, on computers, I don't know what is going to be the future. But Portugal, it's really happening and people are set to get interest. and start to understand a little bit the difference and what could be an alvarino or what could be a Douro white, and it's incredible because people didn't have the idea. I tell you, if anyone is drinking right now Schist Ilimitado or Schist Cru white, I can tell that wine is salty. They are always salty. Don't ask me why. I think it's coming from the schist, from the mica schist soil, but they always have a salty character. I don't know why.
So where do you see this wine heading into the future?
Well, in the Doro Valley, to have old whites, I only taste once from Baixo Corgo on the limit with the Vinho Verde area, really on the slopes to the Douro River, 1934 white. And I tell you, that was at least 50 years younger. We have a lot of experience with old down and Bairrada. They really age very well. Well, experience with the Douros, we have the early 90s. You know, it was Newport making the first whites and Duas Quintas, the first white of the Douro. Those wines can age. What I can see, for instance, in Rabigato on the Douro Valley, it have different phases on the evolution. So you can start by very fresh character. It develops and often gives some petrol notes, although the varietal have nothing to do with the Riesling, but I think the sunny character give a lot of the petrol notes, but then keep on going to the more mineral character. So we have already Douro wines with 15, 20 years old that are aging very well. But everything is very soon in the Douro related to the table wine. So we don't know. We'll see.
So can you walk us through the wines?
Okay.
The range.
So, now the range is simple. I'm starting with I'm having now exactly now the Alvarino 18 that actually for a long time I didn't open. It's too young for me to drink it, but it's very interesting to see how the wine is behaving because 18 is a really cold year. For me, it's showing me a great acidity, but it's having this honey character typical from Alvarino, and eventually showing a little bit the malolactic. I think 18 is really a great potential, a little bit like 16, a really good potential of aging. And then we'll see what, for me, that in the Alvarino, I'm still learning, and it's interesting to see that each year have a different relation with the oxidation.
Luis, sorry to interrupt. Luis, what was your motivation to explore, making wine from Alvarino? Where did that passion come from, and what motivated you?
Well, I think Alvarino, it's a great variety that, in general, it's really badly treated in Portugal. So the majority of the wines produced, not only in Portugal, I think Galicia also have a lot of that. We have a lot of wines that are produced in a very commercial way because that sells a lot. So they are bottled at a very young stage. They are really fruit forward, and those wines are perfect, are okay. I'm not against it. I think that just Alvarino can give much more than that. And it's very interesting to follow some of the producers, both in Portugal and in Spain, because at the same time, you can have two neighbors doing, with the vineyards that are really very similar, doing totally different wines. And you have an amazing Alvarins that can age. Well, Olé have plenty of them in the portfolio. Some of the very good stuff they produce in Galicia, and see how the wines age differently. And it's interesting because I have a friend here, one of the most famous Soalheiro producers. Soalheiro, it's an Alvarino producer in Melgaço region. And I've been tasting his wine since the early 90s. And it's very interesting to taste the difference, how the wines are developing. And actually, it'll be very interesting I already talked with him several times, to see what will be the difference of a wine bottled in December of the same year of the harvest, or bottled in May or July of the next year. So actually, traditionally in the region, the Alvarino would be, the region will produce more red wines. People will drink much more red wines. So the white wine was a less considered wine, and that will be drunk much later. So the growers would start to produce red wines, put it in the barrels, and start to drink straight from the barrel. So we'll take a jar each meal, bring it home to drink the wine. So as long as you will going and the level of the barrel will go down and the temperature will go up, the volatile will also go up quite quickly. But of course, these people would not waste money. They didn't have much money, so they would have to drink all the red. So by April, they were speeding up, trying to finish the barrel because the volatile was already impossible. And in the end, the late drinking was the white wine. First, because it was summer. Eventually, they will bottle in 5 liters, big bottles, whatever. But actually, that was the way they would do the alvarino. Would be eventually having malolactic or not, because they would not control it. The sulfur added would be not that much. So those were the alvarino that were traditional produced. So the idea on alvarino, it's okay, why not? Let's see how those alvarino should be tasting now, if we do it the same way. So the first idea of alvarino was trying to catch that wine after a longer aging and less sulfur. So alvarino can be a very powerful aromatic variety, but what, in my case, what is interesting on the alvarino, it's not the aromatics, it's everything else. So the idea from the beginning was oxidize the fruit, the primary fruit character that would not last long in the bottle, and then be able to show the rest in the bottle after a longer time.
Luis, what are you doing differently as far as viticulturally compared to the other growers in, in Gaso, as far as harvesting the grapes and just growing them in general? Are you harvesting a little bit later?
Well, no, I harvest a little bit earlier because I'm doing always 100% malolactic. Right. And that's not common in the alvarino. Eventually you have a few doing it, but it's really not common. And if you know Rias Baixas alvarino, they have plenty of acidity to do malolactic without care about it. We are below Ribeiro. It's a much warmer area, and we really have to harvest in the right moment to get enough acidity to be able to do malolactic. So the harvest has to be early, to the point they have enough acidity for doing the malolactic fermentation. In terms of viticulture, well, viticulture in the Vinho Verde is very complicated. So the main idea that the vineyards are not mine, they are rented, but you can approach an organic farming. But I have to tell you, in some years, with a lot of pressure of mildew, you have to use some chemicals. It's really difficult when it rains a lot. While in Douro it's very easy, in Vinho Verde it's really very difficult to control it. In the very complicated years. Some years you can do it, but some other years only with copper you cannot solve the problem of the mildew.
Have you tried trials of doing alvarino without malolactic from?
No.
Especially with your philosophy.
No, I didn't. But the idea was that from the beginning. What I wanted is to have the malolactic. Well, I have plenty of examples because everyone beside me don't do malolactic, and that will be interesting. But allow me to have the alvarino ready later and be able to do no fining at all or the less fining possible, give a totally different volume to this wine. So I love acidity. So in theory, my first reaction is no malolactic. Actually, it's very interesting. I started working, my first working region was the Vinho Verdes area. And I don't know, I think it's the human nature, always go against the nature around them. So when I was working in Vinho Verde, I said, less acidity, less acidity, less acidity. When I started working in the Douro, more acidity, more acidity, more acidity, I was just going against the nature because of course, Vinho Verde have much more acidity. Douro have much less acidity, but I think the balance in this wine it's done with the malolactic. I'm not saying that could not be an amazing wine without malolactic, but actually, I think that is the that is the key in this wine is the malolactic and the entire aging with no sulfur, so 1 year of oxidation.
I will probably take this moment as your friendly moderator to see if you would talk about the white wines in the Douro, maybe Schist Branco, and start exploring the white wines there. We have some fun news to share about this alvarino, since everyone has been so fascinated. We've got some really great questions, and we'll address those at the end. Like I said before, but Yannick and Olé Obrigado, we've got some fun stuff to talk about regarding alvarino, Luis included, at the end of this call. So please hang on till the end there, and if we can start moving into some of the other
Why
wines.
we get so passionate about this alvarino?
it's incredibly great. We all love it so much. Luis, do you have a bottle to show of Schist Branco so everybody can see how the label is?
Well,
thank you.
I have plenty of bottles here. This is a special day because I'm drinking my own wine. It's very boring. Well, the Doro Valley is a totally different story compared with the Vinho Verde. So here we change completely the region, and we're talking. Actually, it's interesting because actually I was in the Douro Valley just 3 weeks ago, taking a walk on the vineyards, both for Schist and Schist Limitado. 3 weeks ago, the vineyards was just start bursting. The buds were just starting. So everything was just start. It's such a cold area. So it's such a high altitude. I went there because we had some frost, and I was trying to check if we have any problems on the vineyards. And the truth is that the vineyards are just, well, 3 weeks, they were just starting. And it's, I cannot. And actually you see the cycle, it's so much wrong that this area of the white wines compared with the rest of the Douro seems a totally different planet. In case of the Schist white, we're talking about a 800 meters altitude vineyard. It's a vineyard that's, well, in 2019, we harvest in the beginning of October. So that tells a lot if you think you're doing a white wine in the Douro Valley. And it's very interesting to see because the region was originally planted with much more white than red. But at a certain stage, 20 years ago, no one wanted to buy whites and people started planting the reds. But actually it's the perfect region for white wines, and all the producers know that, and everyone would plant whites on that region. The difference in between the Douro style and the Vinho Verde, especially with the variety Alvarino, is that what we have, it's a very tight, mineral, austere wine, because I like to base my wines in Rabigato. The variety, it's really very austere. It's not very exuberant. It's not the wine that you can serve. Well, I know Yannick and Aldo probably can see that those wines that you cannot serve at a very cold temperature because you will not get anything out of the wine. They cannot be served in the small glasses because you don't get anything out of the wine. I normally say, well, I learned the lesson drinking a little bit aged Chablis that you need to decant those wines. Those wines need to decant it, wait a little bit, wait half an hour, because they're going to give you much more. So those are wines that easily can pass by someone without being noticed, but those are the wines that I really like personally. The wines that you need to search in the glass to find the wine. Well, I'm going to taste a little bit of the Schist Cru. I don't know who is having the Schist Cru there, but
me. Sorry, I couldn't wait.
I'm curious about the sommelier perspective from you both, Aldo and Yannick, from selling Portuguese wines that need to be decanted, you know, and what's the conversation you have with your guests about this?
You know, I'll start, but I think in general, you know, there's still a stigmatization of Portugal just being a purely red wine country. Obviously, people still associate it with port, and then followed by the Vinho Verde category. So definitely, it's still a hand sell, I think, you know. And I think going back to Aldo Sohm, you know, Aldo, what he was talking about with the varietals, you know, when we talk about Rabigato and Codea, and Goveo. These are old grapes, but they're fairly new to the mass, to critical mass out here in the United States. So definitely when selling these wines, you need to know a lot about them, but you need to have the ability to be able to translate them so the guest understands what they're all about. But I think once it's in the glass, once it's in their palate, they really, really love it. I mean, this is a wine that offers lots of pleasure, complexity, depth, uber food friendly. The alcohol is incredibly balanced, and it has great texture. I mean, the texture is unbelievable. That's what I really very much enjoy about it.
Well, I think the texture, and in case of the white wines vinification, I think that it's nothing that is singularly from the Douro Valley, but I like to ferment the white wines at high temperature. And the fact you put the wine in the barrel and can achieve 24, 25, 27 degrees temperature of fermentation, that gives you a totally different texture in terms of, you lose a little bit on the primary fruit, but the texture on the palate, it's completely different. And this is a combination of old vineyards producing lower yields together with this high temperature in terms of vinification. I think it really makes a difference in terms of texture. Actually, normally I explain that for me, the texture, the palate in the wines, it's much more important than the aromatics. Sometimes I think winemakers, Aldo spend too much time smelling the glass and not drinking it. And we spend too much time on the nose, and we forget the explosion we can have on the mouth. That it comes back to the aromatics again. And I think as a winemakers, and I learned that with years, and I think in both red and whites, people were working too much on the aromatics of the wines, while actually this is a drink that it's to drink. It says everything, you know. Of course, we enjoy this aromatics, we enjoy all of that, but the majority of the people just are having a food and putting the wine in the mouth and don't spend that much time with aromatics. And I think that aromatics can be discreet, can maybe take your attention a little bit more because they are more discreet. But the palate, when you work this way with a high temperature, the texture is completely different. So you have the acidity, you have a concentration, you have texture, you have different layers also because you're working with schist, and I think that makes a big difference.
Luis, can you talk very briefly, because I know we still have 2 more wines to go, but just the blend of the wine itself and why you decided to go 70% Rabbigato and why each percentage, just sort of like the same philosophy as Bordeaux, Cabernet Sauvignon, more full body, the Merlot softens it up. So can you explain the blend on this particular wine and each grape?
Well, to be honest, if I could, it would be 100% Rabbigat. It's an old vineyard that is not 100% Rabbigat. So on the blend, I think on the blend, Rabbigat is really the most important because it's the one that is less expressive, that can show better the terroir in the soil. I think Goveo keeps a lot of the acidity. It's the same thing as the Spanish Godello. Add a little bit of bitterness, that when it's too much, but when you have a small percentage on the blend, it's perfect. Viuzinho, it's a variety that is very similar to Sauvignon. So when you have a small amount, is okay. If you have too much on the vineyard, it ripes much earlier than everything else, and it's just destroying the blend. And Códega, that is a very local variety. It's clearly the variety that I'm still trying to understand. Yeah, I have many people talking greatly about this variety, but I still didn't understand how it works. In the vineyard, you know, the grapes, they don't taste, you don't feel acidity, they don't have anything that you think you can give. So what I want in the region that have mainly Rabbigat and Códega is to find all the vineyards and get all the vineyards that I can get, eventually to buy the vineyards that have much more Rabbigat and almost no Códega. Seems that Códega was there in the old times also to give production. It's much more productive than Rabbigat, much bigger cluster, and that could be a reason why it's in the blend.
Thank you.
I have a quick question, Luis. You make, I think, 4 reds, right, in the Douro,
yeah,
and 2 whites. Do you see yourself making more whites in the future in the Douro?
Well, to ask any Portuguese that he sees making more whites than reds, or I mean vinho verde, or it's completely impossible. I have a lot of fun both making whites and reds. I really like whites, and I think in the white wine is the best way. It's very interesting to see the discussion, because when you talk with other between winemakers, everyone say it's much more difficult to make a great white than a great red. In general, I would say. But I'll also say that
especially in the Douro, no, a place
especially in the
that
Douro,
has
but it's
so much power.
Yeah, but it's much more difficult to influence a white wine, and I think that's a real question, because I do nothing. You know, the wines arrive, press, decant, put it in barrel, take it from the barrel, put it in bottle. So in terms of work, I do the schist limitado exactly the same way that schist cru. Everything is done the same way. It's really where the terroir expresses itself in a certain way of a pressed wine, no skin contact, but they express without me influence that much. I'm not changing, you know, stems quantity or pump overs or punch downs in different years in those wines. I have the date of harvest and I have the vineyard. Everything else I do exactly the same way, never change. It's very basic.
What do you see your neighbors doing as far as whites? Because I think, you know, we know about the scale of this place, and I know I've always interested in seeing how this project is set apart from what everybody else is doing. Do you think white production will increase or decrease in the coming years?
Well, it's for sure you have more interesting whites in the Doro Valley, so people are learning. So at the beginning, there was a lot of effort putting in doing the white wines. So new barrels, batonnage, give the volume, and people quickly learn that maybe that's not the way. So nowadays, I think you can have much more interesting white wines in the Doro Valley. We just don't have the vineyards. So if I tell you the Doro Valley, it's 45,000 hectares of vineyards. If we have 5,000 hectares of good terroir for white wines, that will be max. I think will be less than that. So you can do white wines, but to do those great white wines, you have to get the good terroirs, and you have 2 or 3. You don't have more than that. So it's not depending on people wanting to do more. You don't have more places where to grow those excellent white grapes to make amazing white wines. The majority of the land, it's for the reds, not for the whites. People have to understand it. So Douro would always be much more reds than whites.
So that said, would you speak a little bit about the reds?
Okay. Schist cru red. So I'm sorry, I have to change the glass for the red. I cannot speak with well, the reds is a totally different story, because if you're talking about the blend in the Douro Valley for the whites with 3-4 varieties, we're talking about blends with more than 10 varieties in the same vineyards. So that can be very complicated in terms of explaining. So what I think it's the blend in the vineyard is part of the terroir. It's a very philosophical question. So should the vineyard have 10 varieties or only 1? I think everything is part of the final result. And I think you just have to read a little bit the vineyards like they are. In my case, I work with high altitude vineyards. So normally vineyards that would be less considered to produce red wines because they are higher and fresher, and this is what I'm looking for. And also for all the wines, I produce, for all the red wines, I do it with the stems. So it's 100% whole cluster vinification. So the main effort is always to give freshness, green character in the warm area. And I think that makes really a big difference in the final result.
On this wine, the wine is it fermented or is it aged in the used portonneaus, 500 liter? And how much influence the wine as well?
It's fermented. Actually, this is a very interesting story, because I was when I started the project, I went to a local old person that they do their own wood for the port wines, and I found that he just bought a very old wood from a tonneau of port wine with more than 30,000 liters. So the wood was beautiful, thick wood. And I asked him to do an open top fermenter, something that they don't understand what it is. They normally just do barrels to age port wines. So it was very interesting when they built that. He didn't believe, and he thought it was to cover it. And I said, no, it's just to ferment the wines, because it's something that it was typical in the vineyard area, but clearly not in the Douro Valley. So that is under fermentation. So the fermentation is a bit Burgundian, because it's an open wood top fermenter, punch downs in our case as less as possible. So it's normally hand punch down as minimum as possible to have less extraction, but with a very long skin contact. The aging of the schist cru, it's normally 228 liters barrels from Burgundy that I use from white wines.
A quick question before we move into the reds. Can you talk about pairings? I know you're an incredible chef, an incredible foodie, you and Natalia. Can you
Chef,
share,
I don't know, but I like to eat.
can you share what are your favorite things to eat with Granito Cru Branco and Schist Limitado Branco?
Well, if you have to choose both, I think Granito Cru, it's much more plastic at the table than the Schist Cru, because Granito Cru have this volume that you can do it with a pasta, even with a pasta with a ragu to the limit, or white meats, very heavy sauces. And I think Schist Cru needs a more specific food, needs some fresh fish on the salt, something a little bit more delicate. You still can have a lot of acidity, able to deal with any butter sauce, but a little bit more refined, because if not, you can pass it. I had Granito Cru with Indian food and works marvelous. And I love spicy food, and that can handle anything. While the Schist Cru, it's much more, also the Schist Limitado. You can do it from oysters, but much more seafood style, while the Granito Cru, I think it's a little bit more plastic because of the volume.
Thank you. Thank you.
So the Schist Cru, well, it's done a little bit against the rules, or at least what I said, against whatever you learn in school. So it's more than 1 month skin contact. So normally the volatile goes higher than normal, and then 2 years aging. The theory is to do, well, it's a little bit like making a tea. Do an infusion, not extraction. So it's a very interesting. It's a very interesting comparison. When you do your tea, and you have, even if it is in a bag, you wait 3 minutes. If you wait the 3 minutes moving the bag, or if you wait the 3 minutes not moving the bag at all, the taste of the tea is going to be totally different, and the tannins on the tea are going to be totally different. And it's very interesting to see that you can move for 3 minutes the bag of tea in your cup as long as you want. Is not going to have more flavor than the bag that you didn't move at all, but it's going to be much more fine on the palate. And that's a little bit the theory that I use in the reds, as less extraction as possible, because Douro grapes have all the concentration, all the tannins, all the colors. You don't need to try to extract anything. Naturally you do it, but with a very long skin contact to be able to polymerize the tannins and to have a little bit rounder palate.
We're coming close to the end of this period. I wanted to point out a few things, which is that we will be receiving, starting in the next few weeks, getting some wine sent out. And we do have some information that anyone who wants, we can share about the availability of the wines. I'm going to show you an image that gives a sense of the scale of this winery and how small.
Erin, please, I need to interrupt. I just saw a question
Yeah.
of Pablo Aguilar asking about irrigation in the vineyards.
Please.
I'm 100% against irrigation in the Doro Valley. We didn't have it until 15 years ago. We don't need it, and I don't use any grape that will be irrigated in the Douro Valley. Sorry, I need to say that because there are plenty of messages dropping and I cannot answer all of them, but this one was because when I see irrigation in the Douro Valley, I get a little bit nervous, so.
Good, it's worth clarifying that point, I think, I love it. We do have a bunch of other questions, and I've scrolled back up and tried to highlight a few of them, so we could certainly address those now quickly. There was one question about the 2018 vintage. You made a comment about the fact that that vintage was marked by humidity, and the question was in what way is that a positive for you and for your winemaking?
Sorry, Erin, you have to repeat. Humidity. You have to repeat the question. I was focused on other things.
There was a comment made that you made earlier about the 2018 vintage being a great vintage because part of it was marked by humidity.
Yeah.
And the question is why that helps.
I think in the warm region, whenever you have a humid year, the wines are always going to be better, especially in the long term. Douro Valley, it's a very warm region. Whenever we have rain enough, whenever we have cold weather, whenever we have a maturation that can go for a longer time, I think for the dry wines, not for the ports, they're always the best years. And we have a very good example, 2001. And I've tasted many wines from 2001. And I can tell you, when they were released, producers were a little bit afraid to show them. They were kind of shy on showing they would not bet in this year. And I tell you, all the 2001s I taste until today, they are really amazing. That was the last year we had floods in the Douro River. That was a rainy year, very complicated. But the truth is, in the warm region, that makes a big difference. So we're talking in the Douro Valley, regions that can have 400 millimeters of rain. And that's almost nothing. If you have a humid year, that's great for you. You have, the vineyards can handle a lot, but once they have the water, everything goes slower. And when a maturation period goes slower, the taste, the flavors on the wine, on the grapes are completely different. So the same thing in the fruit. Any fruit you have if you have to pick it very early from the tree, it's not going to have the same flavor if you leave it right in the tree and then you eat it in the right moment. I think this is in general, it's obvious on the plants world that always works like that.
Thank you. Another question was about the different types of schist with respect to the tannin that it introduces. If you have a short comment about yellow, blue, particularly with the schist.
Well, normally in the winery, I always show the stone. So you were there, you saw it. So I think it's clear after many years working in the Douro Valley that the yellow schist, it's a stone that breaks more easily. So you can see that the soils have much more clay. You have a deeper soils, and those soils tend to give more rounded tannins. So the tannins tend to be less aggressive. The blue slate soil, it is a little bit like the Mosel soil, a very hard stone. You almost don't have any clay. The vines struggle much more to have all the nutrients. They go much more deep in terms of roots deep in the soil to get some water. And those wines are much more austere, and sometimes the tannin is a little bit more edgy. But this is the same comparison that I normally do explain to people about Côte de Beaune, Côte Nuit. Why Côte de Beaune you have more whites and Côte Nuit you have more reds? Because Côte de Beaune is more stony, so you have less clay in the soil. So it's a little bit that difference that you get in both wines. And in the case of the Schist Cru, you have two vineyards. One vineyard in the blue slate, another vineyard in the yellow slate. So it's always fun to taste both along the year to see how they behave. So it's very interesting to do it.
Would you mind sharing with us, just for some perspective, the production on a wine like Schist Tinto, for example, every year? How many bottles?
Well, I can see that. I have my glasses, so I can see what I wrote in the bottle. I always write in the bottle. So if everyone had a bottle, so 4,026 bottles and 120 magnums. That was a good year. So I would say that Schist Cru, the possibilities of the vineyards, you can give max 5,000 bottles. Some years you have 2,000 bottles. So you have 16, we only harvest one vineyard because the other one was totally gone with the mildew. Sorry, not 16. Yes, 16. And 18, that was an amazing year, humid year. We're not going to do any schist cru because the mildew took everything with humidity. So I'm telling you, it's a very good quality year, but you take more risk. And I lost all the production, so there's no schist cru on 2018. So you enjoy 17, and then you have to jump for the 19.
Didn't you describe 18, maybe I didn't pay attention, as such a great year?
Sorry?
Didn't you describe 2018 as such a great year?
Well, why 18 is such a great year? Acid, you know, natural acidity in a warm region, fresh flavors. So in the Douro Valley, in the red wines, if you can have, or at least if I can have an option in between black fruit, ripe fruit, jammy fruit, or fresh red fruit, I want fresh red fruit. If I can have an option of have a 3.5, 3.6 pH or 3.8 pH, I want 3.5, 3.6. And I can only get that in a year like 2018.
But then the mildew kills you.
Yes, maybe I should be more attentive. You know, my problem is having vineyards at more than 1.5 hours distant drive. It doesn't help.
No, but it's just, I mean, it's heartbreaking from a winemaker's perspective. You know, you work with these old wine vineyards, you barely get out a whole lot anyway, and then you get killed on top of it.
But you know what?
The work is finished then.
That's the contradiction of the Doro Valley. I think to make the wines that I really like and to show the possibilities of the Doro Valley different terroirs, I have to have many different parcels spread all over the Doro Valley. But different parcels spread all over the Doro Valley means difference of 1.5 hours driving.
Wow.
You cannot, at that small scale of vineyards, you cannot have a team for each vineyard. So what happened, it's you hire contractors. Contractors do what they can, but they're not necessarily always there the moment you want them. So clearly, a way I can improve, it's in the viticulture. But it's a very difficult way and a very expensive way. But to control, nothing like having the vineyard as your backyard. But unfortunately, in the Douro Valley, it's impossible. Or then you decide to do only one single wine. And that's another option.
You speak of the challenges, but the result is incredible, Luis? I mean, it's
well, I don't know. We always try our best. I tell you.
I'm sure you have a really good protocol for dealing with all the farmers, and because the raw material that you're dealing with, it's unlike any other Douro wines I've had in, you know.
I will be doomed if I would think that everything is perfect and there are not so many things that we can improve. For sure, the way to improve, it's clearly to have absolute control from A to Z. I'm not there yet. Well, you need money for that. You need a lot of investments for that, and that's difficult. But I don't have any doubt that the wines could be way much better if you control everything from A to Z. You don't do that yet, or I don't do that yet. So that we need time to achieve that, and that's at the same time that's good. That's a challenge. We need to improve every year. We need to improve the way to work every year, and that's the most important thing. But it's the great vineyards were there, so a lot of it, like I think in many regions in the world, a lot of it are already in the vineyards. And I tell you, I tasted so many wines done in a very conventional way, when you think those wines are never going to be good. And I tasted those wines with years, and after years, the wines show much more the place than the person that was doing the wine. And that's what would always drive me, seeing people doing exactly against what I think it would be right. Not that I'm right all the time, but then you get to the bottle, you taste the bottle, and you see the place, you taste the place. So no matter, that's why that with the years you learn that you need to be more relaxed and more hands off, because no matter the big effort you do, in the end, if you have a good vineyard, it's going to speak through the wine in the bottle after many years in the bottle.
Well, I want to make a few quick housekeeping points. There's a few more questions maybe we can get to in just a second, but to this point, we're just now seeing the first arrivals of some of the new vintages of the wines that Luis has been talking about today. The Schist Branco Tinto, the Mona C, which he addressed in the very beginning, which is the 100% Castelao, which is really unique and a newer wine in his range of wines. And we have some follow-up information we can share. I know that on this call we have consumers, wine lovers, people in the trade here in the US, and if you just drop a little like, hi, yes, send me please something in the chat right now, we'll make sure to send that to you. We have all of your email addresses already from registered for this call, so thank you. We'll get that to you if you want to learn more about the wines. We will be seeing the Xisto Ilimitado Tinto Branco later this year, coming to the US, just so everyone's aware. And even better news is that if you loved this call, we get to do another version with a longer love letter to Alvarino later this year. We are thrilled that we get to once more work with Yannick and his foundation Wheeling Forward to have El Camino del Alvarino, which is a celebration of the grape Albarino and a testament to its diversity, and also a great way to raise funds. And we will be doing that again in June. Luis will be a guest there as well, and we'll be talking about that Granito Cru that we were all discussing earlier on the call. But Yannick, if you want to talk about Wheeling Forward and the event for just a second, that would be so great.
Yes. Last year we had our first event, the Albarino event in New York City at City Winery, and it was we had a great turnout. Everybody loved it. But obviously this year we have to be a bit more creative, be a bit more abstract. But I would say this year, obviously Albarino is the main actor, but it's a main actor that's going to support a lot of other people, right? And more so than any other year that I've ever been involved since the founding of Wheeling Forward, we have people with disabilities that are having a tough time. So a lot of them rely on home attendants. Home attendants can't get to their house because of coronavirus. Maybe they got sick or they're just scared to leave their house. So what happens if you have a disability and you're in bed and you're waiting for someone to get you out of bed, to get you in your clothes? That's a big problem. That's a big challenge. So with our budget, we've been able to hire some people, to go there and help these individuals who normally would have their home attendants. A lot of medical supplies that they're normally waiting on to get delivered or not getting there on time. So one, I just want to say, it's going to be extremely educational. You're going to have passionate people that really love Albarino. But secondly, you're going to also be supporting a cause and helping people that really need your help during this time. So I think don't miss out. What better than to be involved with something that's actually going to support something? You're not just going to be drinking wine, but it's actually going to have the incentive of supporting a really great organization. So we're really blessed at Wheeling Forward to have the support of Olé Obrigado for these last few years. And they've done such a great job, and we're so blessed. And so thank you very much.
We're so excited. Thank you. I want to thank Aldo and Yannick for asking all the hard-hitting questions of Luis, with some assistance from everyone on this call, with the great combos that were going on in the chat on the side. Luis, do you have any parting shots you'd like to share with us on?
Well, the first thing I need to tell you, we need more 4 hours for this. I see so many familiar faces, so many messages. I don't have time to answer everyone. I want to say hello to everyone. I'm close here at home. It's the familiar faces. I need to say hi to everyone. This is not, cannot be like that, I'm still not used to this.
Longer. Thanks for staying up late for us.
No worries. No, I think it will be amazing to be talking with each one of the persons that are here on that, but it's really very difficult. I see so many questions dropping here, and so many familiar faces. It's always good to talk about the wines, and well, especially in moments like this, to be able to see so many familiar faces and be able to talk with everyone and enjoy at least a few glasses of wine in between the conversation. That's, well, we can do this every day, 3 times a day, don't worry.
Well, we know Aldo does this every day. Quick plug for,
Yeah, Aldo's a professional. Aldo's a
He's
professional.
out there every day. So check out Aldo
Every
live.
day.
Yes.
On Instagram, actually now twice because of my books.
Amazing. Thanks for sharing your evening with us. Aldo.
How is your book, Aldo? Why don't you tell us about your book?
Well, it's called Wine Simple. There's a little bit information about Luis Seabra in there, of course, as well.
That's a good book then.
No, but it's a book, obviously, which features, it brings people who are intimated about wine, takes them the fear away, tells a couple of personal stories because we started at one point out as well. And it should be playful, it should be fun to learn about wine and, you know, open your mind and learn and be hungry for more or be thirsty for more in your case. So that's Wine Simple.
Okay. Cool.
Thank
Where
you.
can I get this in Portugal? Maybe I order by Amazon, no? They should deliver.
You can get anything on Amazon.
Yeah.
No, I know in Europeans actually ordered over that and they delivered. I was surprised. It's now out in Germany too. So yeah, today.
Cool. Well, again, thank you all so much for being here. Thank you to our guests. Thank you, Luis. It's always a pleasure to hear from you. This was great.
Thank you everyone for being here, and I'm very sorry I cannot answer. I'm not a multitask person, you know. I'm a man, not a woman. I cannot talk with you and answer to the question at the same time.
Luis, that's dangerous territory. You do not want to go there.
Oh, now it's getting good.
Not even with Portuguese accent.
Thanks again, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye, Luis.
Cheers.
Thank you so much. Bye, Aldo. Bye, Yannick.
Thank you
so much.